All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to be joined by Laura Brandenburg. She's a business analyst expert and the founder of Bridging the Gap. And she does a lot around writing and speaking and doing courses all related to business analyst work. And so thank you, Laura, for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike. I'm super excited to be here and talk about Salesforce business analysis.
Likewise. Yeah, I get a lot of questions from my students, and we're just going to jump right in because I'm out there talking about how great Salesforce is to launch your career in the cloud, and that's just one of my catchphrases. And I feel like I'm guilty of just kind of glossing over some of those different career paths that people can go down. I say, oh, you can be a business analyst or project manager, consultant, in addition to the ones that I know more about, which is administrator, developer, and consultant. And I met you a few months back at a conference and discovered that you're a business analyst expert. And so I chased you down, as you can attest. And so, I thought I would have you on so that you could provide some insight and some greater background and information and knowledge around just the business analyst path. And so, I guess, the first question that I have for you, and also for those of you that are watching live on the Facebook page, be sure and just type in your questions. We'll have some time to answer these questions. So get your questions in, just type those in, and we'll get to that. But I want to find out first from you, Laura, like, how did you get your start as being a business analyst? Is this something that you dreamed of doing as a kid, or was it something you stumbled into?
Yeah, I definitely didn't know it was a career path when I was a kid. I didn't know it was a career path when I got my first business analyst role, right? And a lot of people do kind of just stumble into business analysis. Before I was a business analyst, I was a quality assurance engineer. And so I was doing data, like testing on the data in our systems. It was a big online publishing company. And I was asking a lot of questions and annoying a lot of people with all my questions about the requirements. And I think that, and I was also communicating with a lot of stakeholders. And so I always thought it was this chance meeting in the hallway where somebody just said, hey, Laura, we're opening up a role. The role was the systems analyst team. We weren't called business analysts there. I think you should apply. And really, I had started doing some business analysis in that test role by creating that process from the ground up and communicating with stakeholders. And so I had started to forge that path, but very unconsciously towards business analysis. And another similar path we see a lot is like a subject matter expert path, right? So like we know a lot about the systems, or we know a lot about the processes, and now there's a big IT project and we need somebody to like do the requirements, right? And we see people kind of fall into the business analyst role that way as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for that background. And I find that, fascinating to find out how people, fall into their roles, because a lot of times we start out as one thing and then we get into something else,
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to me how that ends up working out. And so can you tell me more about Bridging the Gap? Now, for those of you that don't know, Laura's the founder of a company called Bridging the Gap. I'd like to find out more about what you do at Bridging the Gap and how that even got started. Just give me your elevator pitch about your company and what you guys specialize in.
Yeah, so we help mid-career professionals start business analyst careers. So people that have at least a little bit of professional experience, usually are working in some sort of office setting, really get started on a business analyst career path. And I have a book called How to Start a Business Analyst Career. We sell template toolkits, and we also have a variety of online courses that help people learn the skills that they need to be successful as a business analyst. And that all started, it was almost 10 years ago now. I had been in corporate I always forget, I was working in a variety of different BA roles and eventually managing a project management, quality assurance, business analyst team. And I left that opportunity trying to figure out what was next in my career, my life. And I wanted to go back into business analyst as a consultant and a contractor. So I started a blog, right? And that blog has morphed over the last 10 years to an online training company. So I was just talking about business analysis and what I love to do.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. So, so I know that there's a lot of people that, okay, so I guess one thing that I want to talk about specifically that I noticed you mentioned was that you help mid-career People. So
Yeah.
I feel like that's an important designation because you've really pinpointed who you're trying to help. And so
Yes.
this may mean that for those that are mid-career, more than someone that's just coming out of college perhaps, or someone that's towards the tail end of their career, it's that land of the pivot where people have done one thing and they're looking to maybe pivot or change careers or enhance their skills. Is that kind of the ideal path? Do you find that people need some business experience before going down the business analyst path?
You know, a lot of times they do, and that's why we focus on that mid-career professional. And again, that could just be, it doesn't have to be like 40s, right, middle of your career, but just a few years of career experience. And what I see coming out of college, like there are a growing number of entry-level business analyst roles. They're still, you know, few and far between. They're really hard to qualify for. And they're reserved for those college graduates who don't have business experience, right?
Yeah.
But those of us who have business experience, the misconception I see is like, well, I need to go back to an entry-level role. And typically somebody, you know, even in like a Salesforce admin job, like I know a lot of your clients are, or a developer job who has been doing that kind of work for a long time, there's transferable skills and ways that they can qualify for a more mid-level role. It's going to be actually an easier path for them because those entry-level jobs, they're looking for college graduates with entry-level salaries, right? And so it can feel like you have to take this step back to take a step forward. And so we really help you instead more for evolve. I think you used the word evolve, right? Evolve your career into more of a business analysis career path if that's what you decide you really want to go for.
Okay. Yeah. I've seen that, you know, in helping like my own son navigate the path of coming out of school and trying to enter into the workforce, and some other younger people. One of the challenges is, and the hardest thing to really learn or attain out of school is the business acumen. So I think a lot of times mid-career people kind of dismiss all of their background and their experience and think they've got to start over, just like you spoke to. And what I'm finding is if people really embrace their past and really highlight their business knowledge and experience, that can help them tell their story in order to win the interview, if you will.
Exactly. And that business acumen is so important as a business analyst. I know we're going to get into like what the role is and what's involved, but you know, you're communicating usually with a lot of different people. You're facilitating meetings and doing a lot of written business communication. And so to jump into that role at a mid-level, like right out of college, like there's so much you just kind of need to learn how business works in order to really be successful as a business analyst. And so that experience that you have on projects and on, you know, handling different personalities is really valuable if you're looking to move into the role as well.
Okay, great. So if you could, I know that for me, and I've alluded to previously that I've kind of glossed over some of the business analyst path.
Yeah.
I know that you recently just spoke somewhere and you gave a presentation, and I know you've got like a slide deck that you can speak to. Like, where did you speak at recently? What was that?
Oh, I was just in Atlanta at an International Institute of Business Analysis.
Okay.
IBA for short. That's a big mouthful. The chapter there had their Business Analyst Boot Camp, and I did the keynote there.
Excellent. Sounds like a great time. So I think, you know, one question that I have, and it's kind of a fuzzy area for me because I've worked with business analysts and project managers and consultants, and I've even filled some of those roles. And sometimes as an administrator on the Salesforce platform, sometimes you're tasked with gathering requirements and you don't have the first clue how to do that. So could you spend a few minutes just talking about what a business analyst does and where that line ends between a business analyst and like a project manager? I know that I've got some confusion around that, and I've probably misdirected some people. So if you could bring some clarity around that, because I feel like a large part of my audience might find that a business analyst path might be a good fit for them, or might be an inroads to getting a Salesforce job if they know Salesforce, have a business background. So just whatever you can share on that would be great.
Yeah, so a lot of where I would start as a business analyst is understanding the current state business process. So on a Salesforce job, I could see that being, you know, either you are implementing Salesforce.com, and so you need to understand your current sales processes from the ground up, right? Or you're enhancing your implementation of it. And so you need to understand the process around that. And then it's like, well, where is the gap, right? Where is the capability or the way we want the process to flow that the software doesn't enable us to do now? And then that becomes what is really the requirements gathering tool, right? So I think a lot of people jump into like, well, how should we configure this screen in Salesforce, right? Or how should, and that regardless of what kind of technology you're implementing, right? How should we make this look, or what should the software do? When you step back and start with the business process, it gives you a lot of clarity. And the other question that you really want to ask there is like, well, what problem are we trying to solve, right? Why are we doing this? What's the scope of the project? What are we looking at big picture? And kind of having that foundational understanding of where we're going, so that when we get into like, how do we actually configure this piece of the system, often those requirements become pretty clear.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I see that. And what you spoke to was, or you alluded to, was that whether it's Salesforce or some other system, it really doesn't matter. And I think that a lot of people, especially newer people going through my courses, Salesforce just happens to be straddling two different user interfaces for the past 3 years now. One is Salesforce Classic and one is Lightning Experience. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of students get tripped up on how some of my lectures are in Classic. It's like, oh, this isn't the Lightning Experience interface. But really on the certification exams and in the business as well, the interface is kind of a window dressing, and what you need to understand is the underlying fundamentals. And so you were kind of speaking to that with understanding the business process as well, you know. Yeah. And I think that that's something that those that are newer to just the software development lifecycle in general and not familiar with agile methodologies, and those are other areas where I'm no expert in either, but I've been involved. I've been on the receiving end of like the stand-up meetings and working alongside those people. Mm-hmm. But just having the ability to write good user stories, know the scope of the project, the problem that we're trying to solve. I know that I've asked that question before. Well, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Yeah. And then a lot of times as well, you need to be able to traverse between Salesforce and other systems as well. So did you have, would you be able to share, you had a slide deck where I feel like if we could give some visuals around some of this as well.
Yeah.
I know that you just gave a presentation, and I don't know what we can repurpose from that, but not to put too much on the spot.
We got lots of things. I think we'll like jump around these a little bit. Let me just make sure I'm going to share my right screen.
That's always fun.
That's always fun. Yes. Let's see here. So
Laura's getting set up. Be sure and put your questions in the Facebook stream in the comments.
That's interesting. All right.
I see your email.
Yeah, the email with our discussion points. So nothing private there. All right. All good?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. So I think maybe we'll start here, and this answers some of the questions, but it really dives into this, like, what does a business analyst do versus what does an admin do, right? Uh-huh. So this is how the International Institute of Business Analysis, which is like the professional association for business analysts, defines it. And it's the practice, what I usually key in on here is the practice of enabling change, right? By identifying needs and recommending solutions. So in this case, that deliver value, super important, right? What's the business outcome? Why are we doing this? And this is just the container for what we're doing. And in our case, the software solution is probably going to be Salesforce, but solution is actually a general term. It doesn't have to be just technology. I would consider the business process, the data, everything you're going to implement that's different between what you have today and what you're going to have in the future is part of that solution, right? So I think, it's easy to look at like, well, where's the user interface part of it? Like, right, that's part of it, but you really have to look at the whole solution. And the general goal is you're enabling change. So you're enabling the business to do something that it doesn't do today. And so this really does differ from project management. I'm going to kind of skip forward to that slide because we wanted to talk about that, where like the business analyst would be focused on the problem and the solution part of that. And a project manager would focus on How are we going to implement that? What's the team we need? What are the resources? What are the budget? How are we going to deliver it? So a lot of like Gantt charts and scheduling and in scope. And where the business analyst and the project manager typically overlap quite significantly is in like, what's the scope of the project, right? So what are the scope? Who are the stakeholders? What's our key big picture plan? And the business analysis then dives into more of that requirements, the solution, what does that look like? And the project manager would dive into the scheduling and the team and the implementation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, excellent.
This being said, many roles in business analysis and project management are actually combined, right? So this is just a breakdown like of all the different types of roles. And IIBA did a study, and there's actually a slide I have in a different deck that has like 40 job titles, right, that are all considered business analysis roles. And so we see a lot of jobs today, and I'm sure it's common in Salesforce as well, where a professional is holding both business analysis responsibilities and project management responsibilities. In formal terms, I'd call that a hybrid role, right? You're wearing more than one hat, so to speak. We see business analysts and product managers. We see business analysts and testers. We see I think in Salesforce, you're going to see a lot of business analysts that are also admins of the system or maybe developers of the system. So it's not like you decide to be a business analyst and there is a box that fits in, but it doesn't have to be like the entire container for your career either. You can leverage a lot of these skills and capabilities as part of wearing multiple hats in your organization.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. That's why I've seen a lot of different roles fall into or have a business analyst type of flavor to it, you know?
Yeah. The skills are really relevant in a lot of different types of roles. And I think we'll continue to like see a gravitation towards that just because they're so critical.
Got it.
Another way the roles get organized, which is really relevant for your community, is this specialist roles here. And specialist means like you need to have an area of expertise. And we do really see a lot of fragmentation in the profession of I need to be an expert in something, right? And I need to have these business analyst skills to succeed. So that's where the role of the Salesforce.com business analyst would fit. We also see roles specializing around a domain like insurance or finances or mortgage, right? And you might see cross sections of these. Like I could imagine a Salesforce.com business analyst who also knows the insurance industry, right? And having a role that's really organized around that. Agile is another big trend affecting all areas of software development and definitely business analysis as well, where organizations are looking for business analysts with agile experience, knowing how to collaborate in that kind of environment, knowing how to write user stories and manage product backlogs and that specialized skill set. And then one that I think is really let to the way that Salesforce defined that career path, you shared that link with me, Mike, is the data business analytics type role. And so the way that I've been talking about business analysis so far is more of a process and a functional view. That's how my experience in business analysis. And there's a whole nother way the title is used with more of a business analytics and reporting view. So people that are looking at the data that Salesforce generates, that the processes of the salespeople are generating using Salesforce and helping the business make better day-to-day decisions or big picture decisions based on that data. And so I think we're seeing a lot of that with Salesforce too. So what changes do I need to make? How is the data going to inform those changes? And then maybe some ongoing reporting and evaluation of that data to inform even future changes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me get to a couple of questions real quick. Notice Bilal had a question. He said that he's been a BA for at least the last 7 years. And he's going to be taking his Salesforce admin exam next month. Good luck, Bilal, on that. And little experience in Salesforce, how helpful getting the certification will help in landing a Salesforce business analyst job. So can you provide your perspective on how helpful the certification is for someone that has BA experience, who's been a BA for 7 years?
Yeah, so I think you can speak to part of that certification piece, Mike, in your industry. But I think if you're looking to get a Salesforce BA job, that's where this specialist role, like you're really looking at that specialist role, and those employers are looking for the skills and the experience a lot of times in the Salesforce tool. And I think the certification path enables you to present that sort of knowledge. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think I'll piggyback off of that. You know, since you've got the 7 years of experience, Bilal, I think that getting the certification will help tremendously. At one time, I actually had a chance to talk to some of the Salesforce Trailhead team at a World Tour event. And at one time, they were thinking of putting together they called it a business specialist certification that ended up not becoming a certification, but becoming a Trailhead badge or super badge or path. I'm not even sure what it became. But so really the only certification out there that will signify that you understand the fundamentals of the platform is the administrator certification. Now, personally, I feel like it's a little bit of overkill even that you don't need to know everything in order to pass the certification to be an effective business analyst on the Salesforce platform. And like what Laura was saying, there's different types of business analyst roles. And so it really depends on the analytics side or the functional side. And I think that if you've got the admin certification, you've covered the groundwork for both. So let's see. Okay. Oh, so Vincent.
And one thing I want to add there is be looking at, when you're trying to qualify, look at your business analyst background as well for like any experience you have with like sales and marketing processes too. Right. So like if you have before worked with the sales team to understand their sales process or helped implement another type of CRM or customer relationship management tool, like that's that sort of transferable experience. That's not experience with Salesforce specifically, but to any sort of capabilities and experience you can demonstrate there of having dealt with these kind of processes and tools. And now you can layer on the knowledge of Salesforce represented through that certification. I think with how compelling Salesforce is right now and how much need there is in the job market, like you would have a really compelling story to tell about your ability to succeed quickly in that kind of a job.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to piggyback off of that because you're talking about understanding sales process. That's kind of a buzzword for me because I deal with sales processes a lot in my training courses. But this will also help me answer a question, and feel free to chime in on this one as well. This was a question from Vincent. He was asking, in an interview situation, can you give an example of where you can demonstrate Salesforce business analyst skills? And so I'm going to take that one, and then I'll give you a second to think about it, Laura, because I know I'm putting you on the spot here.
That's all right. That's what we do.
Right? Live and unscripted. So with the way that Salesforce is structured, and some of you that have gone through some of my courses, and I recently recorded a lecture called Trust the Process. And this was, I think it was in my boot camp, or I'm doing new versions of all my certification courses as well. So it's all a blur. It's in there somewhere, but basically, in a nutshell, Salesforce has underlying processes that it supports for marketing, sales, and service. In the Sales Cloud, we're dealing with the sales process. Laura was speaking to that. And the sales process inside of Salesforce dictates the different stages on opportunities. Now, on the marketing, that is the lead process. That's what controls the status designations on leads before they go through the qualification and conversion process. And then on the flip side, on the Service Cloud, there's the case or the support processes that controls the status designations of cases. Now, if you can speak to that specificity in Salesforce, then and if you understand on the business analyst side the different processes involved in either sales, marketing, or service, but primarily it'll be sales processes usually, then you can convey that you understand from the business side and from the functional hands-on Salesforce side, be able to speak to that. So getting experience either going through my courses or Trailhead on the Salesforce side will teach you the process-driven nature. And that's really a lot of Salesforce, the underpinnings of Salesforce has to do with processes. That's why I call that subject matter, trust the processes, because it is process driven. So I don't know if you had anything to add to that, Laura, or not.
Yeah, and the question was specifically around interviews, right? How to prepare for a job interview. Yeah. So from the business analyst perspective, I think, I'll like you shared around the Salesforce piece, super relevant there. What I typically will tell somebody to prepare for is like, look at your career and what are the biggest projects where you held the business analyst role that most closely aligns to the job that you're applying for. And that doesn't have to mean like you had the title of business analyst, right? But where were you in the process of enabling change? Where were you in the process of figuring out what the requirements should be, and prepare to talk about those stories and details. And I think if you can overlap that, like if you have already the existing experience in Salesforce and doing Salesforce as a business analyst, like perfect, those are your stories, right? But it might be that in some cases you have to talk about areas where you've done business analysis on a different type of project to be able to demonstrate those skills and capabilities, and then areas where you've demonstrated your expertise of Salesforce. If you're kind of coming at this with, I've done the Salesforce admin and I've done business analysis in this other area, but I haven't done them together. So just, you want to be looking at where have you defined requirements and clarified requirements and identified the business process and engaged with stakeholders, right? Getting them to agree on things that they didn't agree on before, and helped identify what that solution would be and put that into place for an organization.
Okay. Yeah. We got another question. I'm going through, we get a lot of questions, which is great. This is awesome. Keep them coming. And I'm kind of jumping around some, but I want to piggyback what we were talking about. This is another interview question. This is from Tinde, who is a graduate of my admin class and passed the certification. So congratulations there. And they went for a business analyst interview, and the people that they were interviewing with thought that this person was way too technical. And what can I do to improve that? So do you see business analysts getting too technical sometimes, or what's the right balance between technical and the soft side?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because so one thing that you want, like one of the values and mindsets that you want to bring forward in a business analyst role is you want to understand the business need and the business process first. I'm feeling a bit like a bit broken record there. But what that too technical feedback means is you probably knew the Salesforce in in and out, right? And you knew what the solution should be. And so you were probably talking more about your knowledge of Salesforce and possibly even more of the technical knowledge of Salesforce, where they wanted to hear how are you going to meet with our sales managers and understand what their needs are, right? How are you going to ask questions to clarify process and requirements, right? And so sometimes it means that, we as somebody with a lot of technical expertise, the temptation is to jump into solution mode right away. So not think about that problem to be solved, but here's all the things that we can do in the Salesforce that'll make your lives better, right? And that's super valuable part of the process, but you want to make sure that you're asking questions, listening, understanding that business need first, and then making sure your solution that you're presenting serves that need, and that you're communicating how it serves that need. And I think that's probably the underlying root of what that too technical feedback meant in that case.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, that's great feedback. And I think even when we're leading up to the previous thing, I got way technical and said, well, this is about a job interview, right? So you got right to the point of and I know that I'm guilty of this because I spend hours just explaining, here's where you click and here's what you do. But with the business analyst role, you're answering a lot of times the why and the how, but it's the how in the real world does this happen, not in the software. The software is kind of almost secondary. It's more the process. And it is, we're repeating this, but it is process driven, and all businesses have their own processes in order to succeed and to do what they do. And so to be able to boil that down and translate that into user stories, requirements, and make that, and I think as well, not falling in love with technology or thinking I want to do this new, shiny, interesting thing. If you find yourself gravitating in that direction, you may be more of a developer type. But if you're strong organizationally are okay with being, I guess, platform agnostic, even as far as the technology, just as long as it gets the job done and you keep your eye on the prize and the goal. That's more of a business analyst sweet spot, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, there's wins that we have as business analysts where it's like, oh, we fixed that without ever having to engage the tech team, right? Mm-hmm. Like we go in thinking we have this big project and we're like, oh, we can make a business process change here, here, and here, and like problem solved, mm-hmm. right? And like that's a huge win for a business analyst. And so to have that mindset of that solution doesn't have to be definitely it doesn't have to be a specific solution going in is really important.
Okay. So one request is that people are wanting a copy of your slide deck. And so we'll need to make that available somehow. So we're not prepared to do that right now live, but we'll add a link for the slide deck after the fact. And I know you've got a few more slides maybe that you want to share from. Let me grab another question though real quick. I've got a couple of names I recognize from my boot camp. There's Dharmesh, who migrated to the States and couldn't find an IT job. So he's going through the boot camp and he's having difficulty finding Salesforce jobs like admin or business analyst. And he's wondering if you could give some input on how he can market himself to land a job, or how Salesforce business analyst skills can help me to get the job fast. Now, I don't know if I can speak to that. I feel like it'd be good for Dharmesh to get maybe your perspective, because he's been getting my perspective in the boot camp. So,
yeah. And do you know, since he is a past client, do you know a little bit more about his career experience?
Yeah. So I think that Dharmesh has been working in retail for the past couple of years, but has a lot of development background, Java. And then this is just going from memory, Dharmesh, so correct me if I'm wrong, but and so it may be more of ultimately a developer path. But I think that a lot of times getting to that point, sometimes you got to have a way station, if you will, and that may be an admin role or a business analyst role to get some experience on the platform. And so I know it's hard sometimes because if it's outside of your core skill set, because like if you're a coder, then that's probably the primary focus you want to go, because I imagine you don't find that do developers make good business analysts or not, or
they do. They sometimes find their way into that business analyst path, right? So I would say about half of our profession was in technology, like came up through technology, and half came up through the business, right? But it's the developers who like to talk to people, right? So there's a bit there's usually in business analysis, you can expect to be in meetings, a third to a half of your day. Okay. And so is that a typical developer would prefer to come in, have maybe their stand-up meeting, maybe one problem-solving meeting, right? And heads down coding. That's my perspective of how a lot of a true developer. And then they would, maybe in that technical architect career path, they want to be really understanding how the technology works and that technical focus, right? The business analyst wants to be out with the business community, asking questions, handling a lot of ambiguity about those needs and wants. And so, from what you've shared, it sounds like, kind of focusing on getting any role in a Salesforce, maybe an admin, would be the easiest entry point. I don't know that a Salesforce business analyst role is going to be the easiest entry point when you're making a big transition, like moving to the States for the first time, and kind of also getting that business experience in the States. I think it's going to be a harder transition into a business analyst role than, say, an admin role.
Okay. Yeah, I think that from what I've seen, the admin role, there's more entry-level positions. Analysts, that requires maybe some more experience. But I think with Dharmesh working in retail for the past couple of years, there's definitely the social interaction piece there. And so, and I don't know, Dharmesh, in your specific example, I think the main thing is you're wanting to start a career on the Salesforce platform. And so I just encourage you to just cast the net wide, whether that's an admin role, a business analyst, a developer role, or even like a technical pre-sales engineer. There's different levels of technical ability and chops on a lot of these projects. And so just really, it's just a matter of time. I know that's that's not a specific answer, but I think just really building out a portfolio as well will help on the Salesforce side. And then even just relating your retail experience and just really upselling that as a positive, because you're the rare coder that understands the technical side. You can also interface with the public and be client facing. That might be more of a consultant path, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think if anything, you've got a lot going for you and a lot of options. And sometimes that's a blessing, sometimes that's a curse, because then it's hard to focus on what to do, but that's just your burden. You're multi-talented. So
yeah. And look at your current organization and, you know, where a process is falling down in your organization, right? Like in your store, in the path, are they using Salesforce perhaps somewhere in that organization that you could get involved in that project, even as a stakeholder, like representing your store, and just start doing that kind of improvement work there, like where you're at. And you'll have these stories that you can talk about in interviews as well of how you improved a process in your work. And that is relevant from a business analyst perspective too.
Awesome. Yeah, perfect. So what you're describing, my buzzword for that is growing where you're planted. I didn't come up with that phrase, but that is a good way that people can get hands-on experience. It's where they're at in their current job, build the rest.
Yeah, and it's easy to get frustrated, right? If you want to be a Salesforce developer and you're in retail, like it's easy to be kind of in a frustrated position. But I love that, growing where you're at. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So another boot camper of mine, Blanca, is interested in switching to a business analyst career. Now, Blanca, if I remember right, because I got to talk to Blanca on a coaching call, has done a lot of like Six Sigma and process, is really process driven.
Okay.
I think would be a business analyst rock star. And she's actually asking, let's see, she identified the process knowledge as a strength versus having much of software knowledge. What would you recommend as a learning or development path for career changers? And she is already admin certified. So she's got the certification. She's wanting to pivot to business analyst. And so what is like and I know there's certifications for business analysts. I know that you provide a lot of training resources. And so can you speak about some of those paths and options?
Yeah. I think, you know, this might be a good time to talk about the blueprint of skills. Okay. Is that okay if I switch to that?
That's perfect.
Yeah, I think your question, you know, if we look at the different skills and techniques that a business analyst use, then I'll be able to kind of give her some guidance in that regard. So let me move forward here. So, because the question is really about so one thing I have as a reflection, if you've done Six Sigma and you're process oriented, like you are a business analyst. And sometimes it's just about being able to step into that, right? And say, hey, I've done this before. Like I am a business analyst and now I want to grow in my career. But this is a touchstone of some of the skills. And I know that we're talking about the free training link as well. Inside the free training that we're doing right now, there's a complete like skills assessment guide in part 3 of that training that walks you through assessing yourself against these skills as a business analyst that can give you a great idea of like, where do I focus on next? But the way that I organize a view of what it means to be a business analyst is by looking at these 3 different levels of requirements. And we've been talking about these already, right? So we've been talking a lot about the business level, the process flow. How does the business process or sales process flow? And how do we discover that? And then that software level is like, what does the software do? It's not the technical, like how is the software built? It's like, what are the capabilities of the software that the business needs in order to perform that business process? And some of the techniques that we use as business analysts are use cases and wireframes. So use cases being like a step-by-step flow of how a user interacts with the system, and wireframes being a visual model that shows like what the screen looks like. Right. So a lot of times if you're enhancing a system like Salesforce, you might take a screen capture of your current screen and like add in, we want a new field here. Right. And that might be your wireframe. And then we do reviews and validations, and we turn that kind of analytical thinking into user stories for an agile team. And the use case is really like, it's an analytical tool that helps you discover requirements that you will miss otherwise. And it's just a very highly structured way of documenting functional requirements. And then there's the information level. And we haven't really talked much about this, but I think it's really important for these kinds of roles as well. So this is like, how is your information organized, right? So if you're transitioning from like an in-house CRM to Salesforce, most likely you're going to be moving over your salesperson data, your customer data, perhaps order history, right? You're moving over a lot of data. And I know one of the bigger conceptual shifts that happens is like, what's considered a lead versus a customer, right? Like, how do we actually talk about these terms in our organization? And so like a technique like a glossary, like how do we use that term internally, and how does Salesforce use that term, right? That's part of what we're navigating as business analysts to make sure everybody's really on the same page. And then we go into how those terms relate, like a customer can have multiple orders or multiple support tickets, right? Multiple members or whatever that word is that from that customer that can submit a support ticket, right? And so all of those kind of relationships between those key concepts is what we would model in an entity relationship diagram. And then the data dictionary and data map is when we get really detailed about what specific fields are in our data store and how do those map from one system to another, like if you're integrating between Salesforce and another system. So that's the 3 levels of requirements. And I think for any project, if you want a complete view, like somebody, usually the business analyst, but sometimes, there's multiple people filling that role, is looking at each of these levels and making sure that we're evaluating the requirements from each of these levels. And then the other piece that this emphasizes is the analysis techniques versus the communication techniques. So analysis being that work that we might do as a business analyst, like at our desk, to model the flow, to write the use case, to create the wireframe, to kind of create these visual and textual models, the documentation, and how equally important the communication is, which we've been talking about as well. So how are we discovering the information we need from business users? How are we validating those requirements? How are we talking about those requirements with stakeholders? So be thinking about kind of the analysis part as well as the communication part. And so to answer the question that we receive, like, where do I need to grow? So it sounds like that individual, I apologize, I'm kind of forgot. What was her name again?
Let's see. Let me. Blanca.
So it sounded like, you've probably done some of the process piece. You've got the Salesforce admin knowledge, right? So do you want to grow your business analyst part of your career into the software and information level areas? Or do you want to grow it perhaps further up into more scoping and big picture and, higher level business analyst roles as well. But these would be the core skills that I would be looking at developing and bringing to the table to succeed as a relatively new business analyst.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to try and get through some more questions here. Real quick. This is great. Great engaged audience here. So
I love it. I love questions. It's so much more fun than just, talking.
Right, exactly. Yeah, keep them more conversational and also to meet the needs of those that are watching. And I noticed that we've had like about 75 to 80 people watching just kind of nonstop. So an engaged audience, this is great. So Bob Deep is asking, he'll be taking the admin exam at the end of this month. Good luck, Bob Deep. And this will be his 3rd pivot in his career. And his question has to do with what size company should he be focusing on. And he's wanting to get in a business analyst role. And a little bit of background on him is that he has 2 years of accounting and auditing experience at a Big 4 and 2 years of software sales experience. So he has a couple of years of accounting experience, a couple of years of sales experience. And he's leaning towards a startup or small company using Salesforce. Mm-hmm. So do you have any insights on what size company to target given his background?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can target any level, right? It's what do you want? So at a smaller startup company, I would assume you would be probably wearing a lot of hats. So you might be business analyst, admin, project manager, you might, and perhaps growing into other areas of the business as well in a really small startup. In a more mid-level company or mid-sized company, you would probably have opportunities to really focus on building like a business analyst career path or a project management career path or a developer career path, right, of where you want to go. So what is it? Do you want that variety? Do you want a really defined role? Do you want to be consulting? Like you have the accounting background, consulting for the Big Four. Like, do you want to bring that forward and work in a lot of different companies and do more consulting? So I don't think your career background dictates that. It's really what do you want out of your future career and where do you want to go next?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I think it's an interesting background, being with Big Four background and looking to do smaller stuff. You got a lot of options there. So
yeah, you can position that as a strength no matter what you want. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just looking through some of the other questions. Prina asking about the admin exam, helping land a Salesforce BA job. We kind of talked about that before. So I think we'll call that one answered previously. Prina, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name. And then Vikram he's been a hybrid BA / project manager and is wondering if getting the admin certification will help him land a few interviews as a project manager who potentially will manage Salesforce projects. So this is getting more into the Salesforce project manager role. And so can you speak about, you talked about previously in the slide, the difference between a project manager and business analyst. So he's been more of a hybrid role. And in the question specifically is the admin certification. I think that will help in a nutshell. But can you speak about manage? I know you don't have specific knowledge on Salesforce projects, but from where you sit, what do you see the trend being with Salesforce projects as far as business analysts versus project managers? And I guess too, is there some sort of trajectory? Do people tend to just land in the BA role, or do some of them step up to project manager, or is it they go from project manager to business analyst? I'm sure, depending on who you ask.
All over the place. Yeah. Historically, when like 10 years ago, when I started Bridging the Gap, it felt like there were a lot of people who wanted to get into business analysis because it was seen as like an easier path to get into on the way to being a project manager, right? And so that was that historical, like it was a progression. And there are still organizations where like the project manager is really managing the whole team. And so there's like a sense in which the business analyst reports to the project manager. But there are also like, if you're in a dual project management business analyst role, there's people who realize that and realize I love the business analyst part more, right? And see that as their growth path. And if you're saying, I like the project management more, I want to be managing the people and managing the team and overseeing the schedule and the budget, like then you can grow towards that. So, I mean, I think the challenge is we are seeing a lot of consolidation in hybrid roles, like we talked about before, where, you do have to almost wear some of both of those hats in a lot of organizations. So it's really figuring out what you want and then finding the organization that has the career path to support that.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah. And defining, probably partnering with a business analyst who's going to do that high level business analyst work so that you don't have to, right? So making sure there's a career path for them as well.
Okay. I've seen that. It seems like, especially in today, you've got to be versatile and multifaceted, and it is kind of a continual learning environment. And so the business analyst path will give you, I think, exposure to a lot of core skills that could translate into business analyst roles or potentially consultant or project manager, in addition to admin or even potentially developer as well.
Yeah.
So a few other questions. I'm going to try and get through some of these really quickly, and then we'll talk about some of your training that you have available as well. Bashir is someone that actually, he comes from a sales background and recently passed the admin exam. Thanks, Mike, and is reading Laura's book. Awesome. So we've got a shared person here.
Yeah.
Have others with similar backgrounds pivoted into a BA role. And so a sales background, passed the certification. And so what have you seen has been the typical journey for someone to make that pivot?
Yeah, usually, so as a salesperson, you want to become the subject matter expert on a project. So if you can be the one who is representing your sales team, at project meetings or whatever I'm assuming your organization is using Salesforce, right? So is representing what the business needs and wants for Salesforce. Often that can merge you into like falling into the business analyst role. So that's the most common path for somebody with a business background, which I would put sales as like part of the business background, is they start as a subject matter expert on a project. And then maybe there's nobody doing the business analysis, right? So you've got a great admin or a developer who's going to make all the changes and do the configuration and setup, but nobody's really talking to the sales team about their business process, right? And you can be the conduit for that and start identifying and using some of these techniques that we have here to clarify what you want, what your team wants, how the process is going to work. And you really just jump in and start doing it. Often there's a gap that needs to be filled, and it's just like, there's your BA role.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So then Bruce is asking about an expected pay range in a major market like here in New York City for an entry-level Salesforce admin. Salesforce admin position. I thought it was a BA role.
Yeah.
So I'll answer that offline. There's some resources available on Trailhead. I actually have a link in the description. I thought that was a business analyst question. Sorry about that. But one of the links of the many in the description here where we're streaming from is the Salesforce business analyst description on Trailhead. And if you click on that, there's other roles in addition to business analysts. They give you average salaries. Now, I'm not sure on entry level of what that
was like 104,000, right?
Yeah, for business analysts, average salary. Yeah. So,
and that's high. The piece the average salary for the last salary survey done within IIBA for business analysis, and this is in the US, was 94,000. I'm not sure if that was US or worldwide. The worldwide number, which of course is really hard to determine, but that was 84,000. And so my takeaway from that is like, when you have the business analysis plus the Salesforce, right, you're actually qualifying yourself for a higher salary by bringing those two skill sets together.
Yeah, so it's almost like a $10,000 premium, above and beyond the typical BA role if you add Salesforce into the mix. So that's interesting to me as well. So,
and I'm sure if you're going from Salesforce admin to Salesforce BA, I mean, is a typical admin role around the 104, or is that?
Let me.
I don't mean to put you on the spot there.
I got to pull up the link.
Okay, no worries. But I'm assuming that would also be a jump because it is a higher, you're you're enabling change at a bigger level. Right.
So this average Salesforce admin, according to Trailhead, is 95,000. So so it is a jump to go up to business analyst.
Yeah, perfect.
Right. So we've got a few more questions, but I think while we're here live, I think we've got about 10 more minutes or so.
Okay.
I wanted you to talk about some of your training and some of the things you have going on. And I sent out an email, so some of you may have already seen an email about some of the stuff that Laura has going on, but for some of you, this may be new information. I know that she's got a program that's only open once or twice a year that's currently open enrollment, and then as well some free training resources. And so, Laura, can you share here about what you have going on as far as training resources?
Yes, for sure. So the free training that we talked about a little bit earlier with the skills assessment, that is available now. And it's available as we're taking registrations for the Business Analyst Blueprint, which I'm going to talk about here in just a minute. So it's available for about the next week as our free training. And we do make this available just once or twice a year. So this goes through like the overall view of the business analyst role. What does it truly take to be successful as a business analyst? We go through business process in a fair amount of detail. I share my template of how to analyze a business process. And there's a video that goes through it of like, how do you get started analyzing a process? So that's a great way if you've like never done that before to have a takeaway there of how would I apply this for an admin change or an update we're making to our Salesforce implementation, and to start experimenting with some of those skills. And then we have kind of an overall view. It's the Business Analyst Blueprint that we went through here, but I also shared visual examples of a lot of those techniques, so you can kind of get a better feel and more in-depth feel, along with a skills assessment guide. So that's all available in our free training just for I keep losing track with the holiday week. It's like just through next Tuesday, so a little less than a week.
Okay.
So that's available to you now. And then we do have our Business Analyst Blueprint program, which starts September 13th. So that's next Thursday, and registration does close next Tuesday. And so this is a 4-month interactive program supported by instructors. We have 6 instructors now, all with deep experience in business analysis. We go through all 3 modules of the Business Analyst Blueprint in depth that I just talked about. So the business level, the software level, that information level. And then we also include our BA Essentials Masterclass as a self-study bonus. And that goes through the end-to-end business analysis process. So we didn't actually talk through the step-by-step process here, but it's a structure for, as a person assigned to a project as a business analyst, what are the steps you go through, right, from beginning to end, and that class walks you through those steps and how to do each of them. So we have videos, audios, we have like all kinds of formats. Like every lesson has either a checklist or a template or a swipe file. It kind of depends on what we're teaching, right? It's whatever resources you most need to go along with that. One of the really important pieces, and I know, Mike, you and I have talked about how important experience is, right? And so we encourage you to apply those materials. The reason it's a 4-month program is not because like we expect you to take 4 months off and like do the program. We really expect a couple of hours a week where you're absorbing new materials and applying them in your work, with the opportunity to ask our instructors questions through email. We have live Q&A webinars, we have instructor hours, and then you actually submit that at the end of each module and you get a detailed review that gives you feedback about how would you improve this, or what are you doing particularly right? And so it's a really important part of our program, and it's what really helps people experience the confidence of like, I know how to do this, and get that experience even if you're not in a formal BA job today. We help you find ways to like figure out a process to develop and a use case to analyze. And if you are interested in either IIBAs or PMI certifications, that's like a whole nother topic, but it does also count towards the professional credits you need. So usually to apply for any of those certifications, you need 36 professional credits, and your completion of the blueprint earns you the credits that you need.
Yeah. That's awesome. The professional credits, I got to talk to you about that sometime offline, because it's like, how do you, that's something that I would like to add to my own training, is the professional credits as well. But I think that's amazing. And it is all about getting the experience. And I've seen a lot of other questions rolling in, and I don't know that we're going to be able to get into all of them. Some of them are more Salesforce specific. And so I do want to encourage those that are watching. I will follow up after the fact and answer any that we didn't get to on the video. But I do want to encourage you to just investigate all the links in the description, because you'll have access to Laura's free training, information on her blueprint. And as well, you have a webinar tomorrow of your own where you can answer questions about the Business Analyst Blueprint.
Yeah, so that we're going to go over a little bit more about the business analyst role. That'd be a great time if you have questions about your career path or about the Blueprint program. I'm happy to stay on a bit here, Mike, but I know, like, depending on agenda, but this would also be a great opportunity. I think you're going to put a link to the registration for that. And, if you want to connect further.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, if you do have a few minutes, I'll try and get to a few more questions here. So let's see, I've got my list, keeping track.
Should I stop sharing my slides?
Yeah, you can stop sharing. And maybe I can.
Do you have anything you want to share?
Yeah. So as far as some of the questions that we've had, and some of the ones that are more Salesforce specific, I'm seeing some questions around, hey, what trailhead should I take, or what certification should I go for Salesforce specific? I do have in the description of the webinar here where we're at, a thing called Salesforce Career Paths. That's the new course that I created, and that's on my own learning platform. We're in the process of launching our own learning platform. So I do encourage people to check that out. That will answer a lot of the questions that you may have about the different certifications. And I do have pieces on there on business analyst, project manager, consultant. And just in a nutshell, most of those paths start at the administrator certification, because that's where you'll find the fundamentals. So I want to encourage you guys that are more Salesforce specific to just check out that new course. And then I'm going to try and hit a couple more of these questions real quick. Ellie, currently interviewing for a pre-sales engineer. I talked about pre-sales engineer role previously for Salesforce. I've been told that I need to prove myself as someone who has sales and business acumen. I'm not sure how I can gain that knowledge so that I can handle the interview questions. What kind of questions to ask clients? What questions you would ask when gathering business requirements? So I think that it sounds like a lot of that will be in your free training even. But
I would dive into that second part on the business process template.
Okay.
So that, and it's a start, right? We talked about starting from where you're at and growing from there. So that's how you start asking the questions, understanding the business process, which will lead you to some of that business acumen. So I would start right there.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Priyanka is a business or process-oriented project manager with an overall experience of 13 years, looking to venture into Salesforce to manage Salesforce development projects. Okay, so that's one of the Salesforce certification recommendations. So I would recommend admin. Sorry, I need to filter some.
It's hard managing questions. I did see one at the end about the PMP-PBA credits.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And I just wanted to affirm that 36 professional credits is PMP, relevant to the PMP as well. So get that one for you.
That's amazing. You know, I got to learn how to get credits. Let's see. All right. Let me see. Okay, yeah, I think the rest are kind of technical in nature. So I think for a landing, I do encourage you guys to check out Laura's webinar tomorrow. Sign up for that. Get any questions you have answered. Check out her free training. Look into the Business Analyst Blueprint. And thank you so much, Laura, for spending this time with me.
Thank you too. It's so great to be here. I could talk about business analysis all day. So thank you.
Great stuff. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone else for joining us today. And we'll see you in the cloud.